It's so wonderful to be able to look over the nose of your airplane, look out the side at the horizon and see something that most people will never see, that God created. The beauty of the earth, the blue of the sky, and the individual freedom of flight. Men and women have dreamed about it since they were born, centuries and centuries ago. And for those of us that have that privilege and opportunity, what a blessing.
If you're confused, you are in Theater in the Woods. We're sponsored tonight, as we always are, by the really good people at M&M's, Mars Company, and Bose. We truly wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their generous sponsorship. I have to apologize to them, even though they didn't say anything. When we had the Apollo last year, or the year before, whenever it was, I looked out and there were about 15,000 people, and I knew they weren't here to see me. So I looked, and all I said was, here they are. We know why you're here. I probably should have, under that bigger crowd, said, thank you, M&M's, thank you, Bose. So I think they'd understand, and hopefully you will too, but buy M&M's, buy everything that Mars makes, and Bose. It is a pleasure to welcome back to our stage one of the most lovely people I've ever worked with as an interviewer. Lieutenant Colonel Olga Custodio is a retired Air Force pilot, 24 years of service. She has a lot of firsts. She was the first Hispanic U.S. military pilot to complete the Air Force military training. Then she became a T-38 instructor. After her 24 years of service, she became the first female pilot at American Airlines, where she retired as a captain with 20 years experience. Her aviation career spans 30 years and a total of 11,000 hours, which is about 11,000 hours more than I have. So please give a generous welcome to Lieutenant Colonel Olga Custodio.
Thank you. Well, good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here. Welcome to the 12th Annual Women's Venture Celebration of Powerful Female Pilots. I want to thank you for being here. First of all, I want to see how many female pilots we have in the audience this evening. Outstanding. Now, leave your hands up. How many of you are working towards becoming a pilot? And then I need all the people who advocate and support aviation. So every hand should be up. Awesome. Fantastic. It's an honor to be here once again. I want to thank everyone who made it possible for me to come back and moderate a great event. This event is fantastic. Last year we had 7 panelists. Tonight we have 4, so we'll have more time to really get to know these women. I have the honor of introducing a tremendous, powerful, trailblazing female aviators, some of which started their aviation career in the U.S. Armed Forces, and some are still serving. Their leadership and commitment to their aviation profession is second to none. It was inspiring to read about all the years of education and training and hard work that elevated them into the aviation leaders that they are today. Tonight, celebrating powerful female pilots is the capstone of an incredible day for WomenVenture. This morning we were at the Women in Aviation breakfast and heard Captain Tammy Jo Schultz, Southwest captain, who heroically was able to land flight 1380 after this catastrophic engine failure. And at our WomenVenture luncheon, we heard Colonel Kim Campbell talk about her A-10 adventure and how would I say journey of this aerial combat that got hit by a ground missile, and how she was able to bring that aircraft back to safety and land the aircraft. That earned her a Distinguished Flying Cross Medal, and we'll hear from her again. She will be part of our panel this evening. We'll have a casual conversation with these ladies, and we'll be able to learn more about their accomplishments and their journey to where they are today, and what inspired them and made them the leaders that they are. I'm going to do a short introduction as they come out, because you will hear directly from them where they are at this present moment, and then we'll talk about how they got there. First of all, I have Captain Lorraine Morris. She's a United Airlines check airman and captain on the EAA's B-17 aluminum overcast. Please welcome her. Our next panelist is Dr. Eileen Bjorkman. She is the U.S. Air Force Deputy Director of Test and Evaluation and an author. She is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel with 30 years of service, has a master's in aeronautical engineering, and she also has a PhD in systems engineering. Please welcome her. Our next panelist is Colonel Kim Campbell. She's a professor at the Air Force Academy and former A-10 pilot, who I talked about, who survived the incident over Iraq in 2003 and awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. And last but not least, Captain Beeb O'Neill. She's an Air Force Academy grad. She has a Bachelor's of Engineering and a United Airlines System Chief Pilot. Please welcome our panel this evening. So welcome, ladies. It's great to have you here. I hope our audience will get a little bit more from your story and your journey, and get to know you, as women in aviation, and how your journey made you into the leader that you are today in your present position. So what I'd like to start with is to tell us about your current position, what you do, and how many years you have been there. And I'd like to start with Lorraine. I'm going to call them by their first name. They allowed me to do this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm currently a captain at United Airlines. I've been there 30 years almost. On the 777, just got checked out as a line check airman, so I'll be able to bless the new pilots on the line and let them go out on their own, as well as give line checks. On my days off, I also fly the B-17 for EAA. You'll see it flying overhead. Sometimes that's me. And in my spare time, because y'all have to have spare time, my husband and I restore airplanes, and I'm building a little airplane on my own.
Very good. Excellent. Eileen?
So I'm currently the Deputy Director for Air Force Test and Evaluation at the Pentagon. And in that job, I oversee all of the test infrastructure within the Air Force. That's like our test ranges, all of our test facilities, like the McKinley Climatic Lab, and some of those sorts of things. So I've only been in that job for about a year, but I've been in flight test for the majority of my career, both as a military and now as a civilian. So.
Okay, great. Casey. Thank you.
I am currently the chair of Air Power Innovation and Integration at the United States Air Force Academy. I spend my time as an instructor in the Department of Military and Strategic Studies. So I teach cadets about military strategy. And I also teach at the Academy Airfield flying the Cirrus. And it's the cadets' introduction to flying in our powered flight program. I've only been at the Academy for about a year. So it's a new tour to me. I had recently finished up my time at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base flying A-10s as a group commander. But it's fabulous to be at the Academy because I get the opportunity to spend time with our young cadets there, mentoring and teaching them about aviation and about the Air Force.
Very good. Thank you. And Dee?
I'm the assistant chief pilot at American Airlines. So we have almost 13,000 pilots that are actually active, and they are around 8 bases across the world, including Guam. And my function is to ensure each base is kind of managed in the same way and to deliver good customer service to our pilots who are our internal customers, and in turn to build a really healthy and just organizational culture for a group that's very transient, very autonomous, very intelligent, and really with a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. So we're proud to say that we really are building this post-merger, building a really great culture for pilots and really for anybody in the aviation field at United Airlines.
Very good. Thank you. Well, thanks for sharing that. What I'd like to ask you now is, in your current position, what is the favorite part of that job that you're currently doing right now? Beep?
Let's see, the favorite part, I think, one besides the people, is the great tempo and pace that we have going on now at Airlines. We're hiring, we're ordering airplanes, we're adding markets, and upgrading first officers to captains. So all of this tempo is really positive, but we get to get these new pilots on board and get to share that what we want the new United to look like. So it's really been amazing to be at the helm of this flight operations group and watch them really engage with, the industry, with their coworkers, with their new pilots, with upgrades, with new jets. It's just everybody's is really on a tremendous uptick like we've never seen before in the industry since I've been in my airline for almost 3 years. So it's really great to be here.
Outstanding. Outstanding. That's great. And I heard you this afternoon say that there's 7% of...
7.4.
Okay.
And we do most of the highest percentage of American pilots in U.S. Airlines. So we're really
Yes.
proud of that.
Yes, that's amazing. It's a big change. I mean, I remember when I started, it was less than 0.1% of women in aviation. And being one of the first, I was hoping that by this time, 40 years later, it would have a bigger number. But we're still struggling. We're still trying to get women into aviation. And hopefully this panel will teach us and be inspired on how you can make that a profession and a career. So as far as being the lead there at the Academy, the best part of your job would be?
The best part of my job by far is mentoring cadets. And I feel like while instructing is fun, it's an opportunity, it's really my door to meeting cadets and gaining trust with cadets and being able to talk to them about aviation and give them guidance about their futures, because at this point they're very much deciding what they want to do for the rest of their Air Force careers. And so I have an opportunity to sit down and talk with them and share with them. I think the other thing that's just exciting to see is, compared to when I was at the Academy, which I graduated in 1997, there was 12% women there. And to see now that there are 28% women in this new class, it just shows you how much it has improved over time. And teaching down at the airfield, I see all these young women excited about aviation and excited to go fly. And I think it's been rewarding for me. It feels a bit like I've come full circle since my time at the Academy.
That's great. Now, of those women, how many actually will go into the flying career for the Air Force?
So that's an area that we're working on.
Okay.
Right? We still have a low percentage of women pilots, even less in the fighter community. And so we're working on that. Some of that is misconception about being able to maybe have a family and a career, and so that's one thing that we're continuing to work on by having role models and mentors and people there that can tell them what it's like firsthand.
Mm-hmm. And you're a great example of that. So
that is my hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Eileen, your job, I know you spent 30 years in the Air Force. You were test engineer also. But currently, as your role in deputy director, how different is it from what you used to do, and what do you like about where you're at right now?
Well, the downside to my job is they don't let me touch anything anymore. So, I don't actually get to fly in airplanes and run tests and things like that. But the upside is I'm kind of on the leading edge of some of the things that we're doing in the Air Force that are very exciting, like testing hypersonic systems, directed energy systems are starting to mature, autonomous systems. And these are all things that are really challenging our current test infrastructure. And even more than the equipment is challenging our workforce. And so workforce development is a big part of what we do. We consider our workforce part of our infrastructure. They're the most important part of our infrastructure. And we've got, like everybody, shortages in engineers. And then, of course, we, like everybody, don't take advantage of half of the potential workforce out there in our women. So we are doing better, I think overall than we were 30 years ago. I tell people when I graduated from test pilot school as a flight test engineer in 1986, I was the only female test pilot school graduate at Edwards on the whole base. We're doing better, but still you can probably count it in under a dozen women who are on the base at any time. So we do have a little bit better luck in our civilian workforce. But again, just trying to recruit and mentor and maintain that workforce and provide those opportunities is very challenging, especially some of the locations where our test force has to live in the middle of the desert. And
Oh, wow.
So trying to provide those incentives and keep people in. I think the big advantage that we have is that we can provide really cool stuff to do. And we often bring people in out of college, and we have various programs where we can bring people in as interns, and then we get them very excited about working on flight testing and try to keep them.
That's an exciting part of that job.
Yes.
To go out and reach out to the youth and try and get them involved and engaged into a STEM career. That's very important. We have a shortage of that too.
Yes.
So, and Lorraine, you're chief pilot, right? No, you're
On the B-17?
on the on the B-17. So I know that you'll probably say that's the best part of your job that you like, but
the B-7, I'm an aircraft commander, which just means I'm qualified to go out with new people. And the best part of that job is that meeting the veterans, because every tour stop that we go to, we actually talk to veterans, we see the people, and now we're starting to see the families of the members that worked on it, because generally the people that served on them, they're all in their 90s, upper 90s. So we're losing them. I think they said 400 a day for World War II veterans are dying off. And when I first started doing this 6 years ago, we'd go to tour stops and there'd be a B-17 pilot and a B-17 tail gunner and they'd be chatting, and there'd be 2 or 3 a day, and now we're lucky to see one in a weekend. We talk to people and they tell us that World War II is being condensed down to a day or 2 in school. So it's our job as ambassadors with this airplane to try to keep the information on World War II out there, what the servicemen that worked on these airplanes had to go through. The average age of a serviceman that worked on the B-17 in World War II was 19 years and 7 months old. So we try to pick somebody young in the crowd out and say, how old are you? You're the captain. You're in charge of 500 airplanes, and make it real to the young people that come out so that they can then sit back and go, they don't give it any thought much. So it's great to be able to be the ambassador for it and keep that information out there. That's really what I like doing. I get to meet a lot of veterans. I get to hear great stories. It's just a lot of fun.
Yes, and what about at United? Is it
well, like Dee was saying, the culture is so good now that's positive. And you were talking about 7% women. In the pilot group as a whole, it's about 6 to 7% of pilots are women. So it just kind of feeds right over into the airline industry. And the attitude is just great now. Everybody's so much more positive. I mean, we all whine, that's our job description, but still, it's great. Everybody's so much more positive about things that are going on. It makes it fun to go to work.
That's great. How many pilots are there at United?
We've almost 13,000.
Wow, 13,000. Amazing. And we still need more pilots, right? Absolutely. So now that we've established their career, their position, I want to talk about where they started and who inspired them. So, who is the most influential person in your life to get you on this career path as a pilot? Or was it something you saw, heard, or experienced at the time? So I'm going to let Eileen start because I know that, right, she was a test engineer, but I know her flying career started before she did that, correct?
Actually, I didn't start flying as a pilot until after I joined the Air Force. So,
okay.
Yeah, my dad was an Air Force pilot, and I moved around a lot and flew as a kid, but I didn't actually start taking pilot lessons until after I joined the Air Force. So, yeah.
So your dad was the most influential person for you to get into that, or was engineering your plan?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was an engineer as well. I think I saw that as a viable path because he did that. So I originally, when I graduated from college, and actually, when I first went to college, I didn't even do ROTC or anything because I graduated from high school in '74. Women weren't allowed to go to the academy at that time. They weren't yet in pilot training and everything. And so I just went through college, and then I graduated from college. And after I graduated, I worked for a year, and I was kind of bored, actually. And the Air Force recruiter was around, and I went and talked to him. And you know, because I knew about the Air Force from my dad, next thing I knew, I was filling out all the paperwork and everything. And I didn't really give that part of it a whole lot of thought. And my eyes weren't good enough to go to pilot training, but after I got into the Air Force, I met somebody who had been at Holloman Air Force Base and had been flying as a flight test engineer. And I said, oh, that sounds really cool, you know, because I'd already figured out by then if you're going to be in the Air Force, you should probably try to figure out a way to fly. And so I went to Holloman and became a flight test engineer, and then was accepted for test pilot school. So I kind of fell into it. You know, it's not like I had this big grand plan, you know, but certainly my dad being in the Air Force and being an engineer, you know, I wouldn't say I necessarily looked up to him so much, but I knew that was a viable career path. So yeah.
Okay. Very good. Right?
Well, my dad helped me get my license before I started college. And I went to college and got my instrument commercial, but I didn't look at it as a way to be a living. I didn't know any women pilots at the time. So for me, I just went ahead and did a job, and like you, I got bored and decided to come up with something to do on the weekends. And that's how I met my husband, who became the mentor to help me, you know, go ahead and get the rest of the ratings and quit my job and become a flight instructor and make it a career.
Very good. Casey.
So for me, it was a moment, I think, more than anything. When I was in the 5th grade, I watched the Challenger launch and watched the shuttle explode. And I think there was something about that that really struck with me, because I think at that moment I realized that they died doing something that they truly believed in, something that was bigger than them. And I told my parents that I wanted to be an astronaut. And so really that moment kind of defined the future for me. And then my dad was also, it's kind of an interesting connection, but my dad was also very influential at that point. He was an Air Force Academy graduate. And when I said, how do I become an astronaut? He said that probably become a pilot first. And if you want to be a pilot, you should likely want to go to the Air Force Academy. And I decided in 5th grade that's what I wanted to do, and really stuck with it the whole time. I'm not sure my dad realized how much I was committed to doing that. I think hard for a dad sometimes to let their little girl go off and do something like that. But I showed him how committed I was. And that's what I wanted to do for my career.
Okay, fantastic. Beep?
You all remember, maybe 50 years ago, the first moon and walk, and I was quite little, but I remember later, it's very pivotal, I got to stay up late, which was unusual when I was young, and I got to watch this on a black and white TV, and listen to the scratchy communications between Houston, Mission Control, and the astronauts. And then later, as I got approaching my college years, I did not want to enter aviation, and I read about Neil Armstrong, and he had done the path. Many of us had it in the military. It was I was age of 6, and we didn't have a lot of resources to pursue the civilian world. So the military was a really great option for me. I was a little, I think I said this earlier, a little bit of a wild child, so the structure that they had brought me is perfect for my temperament. And it taught me to be a little bit more disciplined and focused on really where I wanted to go. I didn't want to fly, and the military was just a perfect fit for me. But Neil Armstrong, I got to give him credit.
That's great. I remember watching that on black and white myself. So, yes, I know. And then the sign off, there wasn't any 24-hour TV at the time. So, but the most strongest quality that you see in yourself that help you get through, the challenges that you had as you were pursuing your career, what do you believe that helped you get through those moments, and the quality of perseverance, or just wanting to get there, or that sort of thing? So, Eileen?
There's a certain amount of just perseverance, but I think it's also just believing in myself, and that's not a quality that I had actually when I came in the Air Force. And when I first came in, and when I went to OTS, I wasn't even sure I was going to pass. I remember I got there, and this guy was talking about drill performance review, and we had to march people around, and I'm like, what? We have to march people around, and it was terrifying to me. But as we got in there and we started learning how to do it, everything, and the Air Force really knows how to train people. That's one thing they do very well. And just I learned that I could do those things, and it instilled a lot of confidence in me that I didn't know I had. And I think just having that confidence and knowing that even if I have a setback, that I can still overcome it. I think that was, I think that's what carried me through a lot. So not everything was always easy or perfect in my career, but I just had that confidence that I was doing the right thing and that I could make things work out. So.
That's perfect. And from 5th grade? No, you were 5, you said?
5th grade.
Oh, 5th grade. Okay. So what quality did you find in yourself in 5th grade to get you all the way to the academy?
The road is never always exactly as you imagine. And I joined Civil Air Patrol, and so I kind of got the start of being around airplanes, learning about the military a little bit. And then I applied to the academy, and I was confident that I was going to get in. And then I got a rejection letter from the academy that said, you're qualified, but we have too many applicants and you should try again next year. And I didn't give up. And whether that's grit or determination, there's lots of words, but it was a setback. It was a huge setback. And so I tried to come up with some alternate plans. But I ended up writing the Academy Weekly to tell them that I was still interested, and if somebody decided to turn down their spot, I would gladly take it. I even had plans to show up on the day that everybody would arrive, and I thought maybe somebody won't get on the bus, they're going to be scared, and I would just get on. And what were they going to do? So there's been things like that throughout my career. I had a medical setback where as a senior I was told, sorry, not only can you not fly, but you now can't be commissioned, and this is as a senior at the Air Force Academy. It's everything I had ever wanted to do, and managed to work through that, got an exception to policy. And so I think the thing that I tell people is that you may have these awesome goals, but sometimes you're just going to get hit in the face with some surprise of, that wasn't the way I had it planned. That wasn't the way that I originally saw it. But staying committed to my goals and working through those tough times, and they were tough. But trying to just stay committed and not let anything stop me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm positive you learned that through the Civil Air Patrol also. That was a big factor.
I think it's everything leading up to it. It's part of it how my parents raised me and their support, but Civil Air Patrol, all those things along the way between training in Civil Air Patrol, training at the Air Force Academy, training at pilot training, all of those things kind of help build who you are, and none of it's easy. But if it's something that you want, you just have to keep working towards it.
Right. I know as a 38 instructor, I would tell my students, you've got to have at least 20% talent. We can work with 80% motivation, and we can get you through. So that motivation, that perseverance, that quality of wanting something so bad that you work through whatever challenge comes up is really important to get you to the next step. So, what was yours?
I would say not to take yourself too seriously, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to stumble, and not be as successful as you want, and not be perfect. And you got to be okay with that, because the aviation world is all about error, correction, and experience. And they say about people with bad experience, they learn from it, because they learn from a bad experience, or something saying. But it's just, we get very driven, and this is a very male-dominated world, and it puts a little undue pressure. But it's okay to have your shortcomings, and you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and you just press on and continue. That's how.
Absolutely. And being in a male-dominated profession, I'm sure the fact that you probably found yourself as the only female in a class or in a group, or in charge at times, that really is something that you have to deal with, besides the pressure you put on yourself sometimes. That's the biggest thing. So, Lorraine?
Mine would be attitude, I think, and it goes with perseverance, but when you get knocked down and set back, it's how you deal with it. Are you going to say, now what? Or are you going to say, well, let's find a way around that problem? It's one of my favorite little motivational things says that attitude is the difference between an ordeal and an adventure. And if you keep looking at everything as, well, let's see how we can do it this time, or get around it, or make it happen another way, you can keep your attitude positive, you can keep going, not get knocked down and feel sorry for yourself.
Okay. So now that we know the quality you have, what was let's say one of the biggest, because I'm sure there were many challenges, one of the biggest challenges in your journey towards where you're trying to get, that sticks out in your mind, and it was one of the hardest things that you had to overcome?
I didn't have many.
No?
I'm one of those Susie Q's that had everything just not fall in my lap. I worked hard, and I tell everybody, you've got to wait for the opportunity to present yourself, and if you've got yourself ready for that, it'll work for you if you make sure that you've taken every opportunity you can to better yourself, so that when you meet somebody in the porta potty line at Oshkosh and you're talking about jobs that are available, you say, I have those qualifications and I'm your guy. And that's what happens. And so I've been very fortunate. So I wish I could say I worked and toiled and had all these horrible setbacks, but I really didn't. I was very, very fortunate.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's a great story. You know, hopefully you're at the right place at the right time. And you're saying and talking to the
Yeah.
right people.
And
you
you've
don't know who
you've
you're
got your
talking to.
qualifications ready, so that if you want to be a seaplane pilot, get the darn rating, and then go out and fly an airplane. And that way, when somebody says, "Yeah, we're looking for pilots up in Alaska," go, "Ooh, me," and they'll say, "Well, okay, you're here. I need somebody," and we get along. And so I wish I could say that it's. You know, it's just been such a hard road. It's not. I've worked really hard. I've gotten the time. I've done the ratings. I've studied, but I've also had the opportunity.
But you prepared yourself for the opportunities. So when
I
the
did.
time came, it was like, here I am. You know.
Now,
This is
like the B-17, my husband and I did DC-3 type ratings, and after the ratings were over, they said, "Hey, we're looking for B-17 pilots." And I was trying to be the good little girl and say, "You can do it, dear." So he went and did it, and they were looking for people, and they knew I had the rating, they knew I had the time, so EAA asked me, gave me a shot. So it was very fortunate that I had everything ready in line when the opportunity presented itself.
Okay. Any challenge for you, Eileen, or was it like smooth sailing?
Oh, no. I definitely had some challenges. So probably my biggest one was when I was lieutenant colonel. I had a job where I had a colonel boss who was, let's just say he was sexist, you know, and he was making life very difficult for me. And I was reaching a point in my career where I was on a path to, you know, probably make colonel. You know, I knew I was doing the right things and everything, but this guy was making my life so miserable that I seriously considered, you know, just, you know, taking myself off the colonel path and getting out. I had, at that time, the airlines were hiring a lot. I had a friend who worked for United, and he was like, "Eileen, if you would get a couple hundred more hours of multi-engine time, I can walk your resume in and make sure it gets in the right pile." You know? And it was very tempting to do that. But then I had an opportunity that just sort of, I was at lunch with some folks, and there was a general there, and he had a position that he needed to fill, and he said, "Eileen, you should apply for that job." And I said, "Oh, okay." I had no idea what I was getting into, and I applied for the job, and he took me and kind of got me, you know, back, kind of got me back to normal, you know, and everything worked out after that. So, and I really dodged a bullet, because if I had gotten hired by the airlines, I probably would have been one of the first people furloughed after 9/11. So it actually, everything did work out. But yeah, there was definitely a time there, and that I wasn't sure I was going to keep going in the Air Force. But fortunately, somebody kind of reached out and helped me out there. So.
Excellent, excellent. So, Casey?
I named a few already.
I know,
the
I
Air
know.
Force Academy, and then the commissioning issue. I think the other one that it's hard to admit in front of an aviation audience, but I had a huge problem with air sickness in pilot training. And I struggled for my first, you know, couple months there, and it made me really question, was I cut out for it? Is this something I wanted to do? Flying and getting airsick is pretty miserable, actually. And so I knew that I wanted to do this, and I was just going to power through it, and went through all the programs that they have with the flight docs, and finally just one day, you know, it got better and better and better and disappeared. But to this day, I sit in the front seat of an airplane, and I fly the airplane. I don't, those backseat rides are still no fun for me to this day. But it was, you know, there's just times in your life where you think you have everything kind of figured out, you know what you want to do, and then all of a sudden you just have to kind of reassess. You know, is this really it? And how much do I want to keep going and putting forth the effort? And I just decided, this is what I want to do, and I will get through this.
Wow. I understand. As an instructor pilot in a 38, we had MOA, the manifestation of apprehension, and a lot of students in the early phase of pilot training kind of got dropped out, because they couldn't get over that. And that's a challenge. And for you to overcome that is amazing.
Well, and I think the positive thing now is now that I'm flying down at the airfield with the cadets, they get really nervous, and there's quite a bit of air sickness when cadets go fly for the first time. And I can look at them and say, look, you can get through it. I did. It's not that big of a deal. And so I think, they kind of look and go, well, you've spent 20 years flying and you got air sick when you started. And so that's something that helps.
Right. Oh, that's good. This is an experience you can share with them, and they can understand maybe a little bit of the process that you went through in order to do that. So that's great. Okay, Beep.
I've always said good play is the best revenge. So you're going to find naysayers out there. You're going to find obstacles. Men and women will create obstacles for your goals, professionally and otherwise. I have 4 years to incredible athletes. I just can't help but say it. They're really incredible athletes. And they would get singled out, little cheap shots in the corners, and little trips here and there, and hockey players and lacrosse players, and constant cheeky play. And they would start to get in their head, and they would start to lose their game and lose their edge, and want to play in college and want to get some scholarship money to play the sports they love. And we just had to say, which is what we kind of this is very familiar, is when someone is creating an artificial obstacle for you.
That's amazing. I know as a student pilot, I had a guest instructor fly with me, and we finished the flight, and he turned to me and said, "You aren't going to make it." And little did he know that he just lit the fire under me. And it's like, you just watch me. So you can turn that around. You can turn that around, because people, sometimes they don't want you to be in that position, and for whatever reason, they just don't understand why women are in this profession, or they just believe that you're not cut out for it, or they're just envious, for the most part. So, but being in a men's profession, I want to talk to Eileen about, during that time, going to test pilot school and being in that environment. How was that, getting your foot in the door, getting that respect in that world? How would you describe how you overcame and how you went and spoke to your peers and those above you?
I think the best way to do that, and what I did was, you just try to always be super prepared, always try to do your best at everything. Now, obviously, you're not going to be perfect at everything you do, but I probably studied twice as hard as I had to, just because I was always fearful. I felt like if I had a problem, that it wasn't just me, it was a reflection on all the women who were trying to come behind me as well. So I always felt like I had to, try to be, if not the best, at least up there, in contention. So, And, and there's this saying that, in order to be considered as good as a man, you have to be twice as good if you're a woman. Fortunately, that's not hard, and and I wouldn't say it was easy, but that certainly was, I think, always on my mind. I always tried to be, and part of my problem too was I didn't really have any role models. You were probably in the same situation, where I don't think I met a woman who was lieutenant colonel a full colonel until I was a lieutenant colonel. So that's how few women were in the business when I was going through, and so yeah, I had to kind of feel my way through things at times. So a lot of times when you're at the club, you can't just be one of the guys, but you still want to be part of the group, and so kind of trying to feel my way through that and be a part of that. So I think having a good sense of humor helps. You mentioned that and I've always think I have a good sense of humor. I try to see the funny things and so I think that helps a lot. So to try to maintain that sense of humor. And to, like I said, to be part of the group, but without crossing that line into being one of the guys, and that's kind of that line that I always tried to walk. But it is hard. I mean, it still happens to me today, where I go into a room and I'm the only woman in the room, and I sometimes feel like with these people that don't know me, they're looking at me like, well, who's she? And I sometimes still feel like I have to prove myself to prove that I am allowed to be in that room, that I'm capable of being there. So, but I think if you're just prepared and you act professionally, people don't have any reason to not want you on their team. So,
right. So Lorraine, you started flying with your husband. How was he part of that equation? As you progressed in your aviation career.
He's the one that never said, you can't do that. He kept saying, if you want to fly for a living, go for it. And at the time when I was not flying, I thought, yeah, I do. I'm tired of a desk job. I really do want to do this. So he was very instrumental in just letting me go. He said, I'll support you. So I thought, well, he has these visions. He's sitting there. He has these visions of coming home to the little wife, having dinner ready for him as I'm the flight instructor, getting things ready. And he didn't know me that well, so that's not the way it worked. He's very good about it, but I'll tell the one real quick story. He came home. Yes. I'd been flight instructing for about 10 hours a day, and I was sitting in front of the TV just totally dead, and he came home. He's an airline pilot, too. He came home and looked at me, and he looked at the TV, and he took his finger along the top and went, you think we could dust a little more around here? And I looked at him, and I said, yes, we could. And he said, oh, and he called a cleaning lady.
Smart man.
He's a very smart man. It's worked very well.
Very smart man.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. My husband and I, we've been married 45 years, and he says communication is key to a relationship. You need to talk to each other and let each other know exactly what's going on.
That's
and not
the
hold
truth.
back. Because you can work through things. So,
yeah.
But he's a very smart man.
And he's still very supportive. He retired 9 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I figured he was supporting me when I was trying to work up to this job, and now he said I've had it, so it's working out well.
All right. And in your career journey, how was that with all the males and getting through that?
College is one thing, the campus is one thing.
Right.
Short-lived. I was a new pilot at American Airlines. I was an engineer. There she goes. Pretty girl. I was an engineer on 747. So that was very interesting because I came from a four-engine public transport where I was instructor, moderator. I went across the water. I had a load plan, I owned loads, I had a fuel plan, weather, alternates. All those things were part of our standard mission planning. And I had two gentlemen that were in the front two seats, and I was the systems engineer, so I was managing fuel heat and cabin pressure and temperatures and all of those things. And I was treated like a kindergarten student, that let me explain this. And I finally said, I have been doing this for quite a while. So the idea that there was a stereotype associated with a woman when I was probably 29 or 30 years old, the stereotype was like very real, and that's what it kind of was. Like, these people don't understand that we come to this job and we're experienced, we are capable, we can fly an airplane as well. We just got into our senior and drove us to engineering. But you had to do it in a very diplomatic manner, and I just wasn't used to that because I had been in the left seat for a long time. So it was one of those things about it. I think it was a champion in those two gentlemen up front. They were just reluctant. So I had to pull those reluctant champions out to say, hey, we all bring something to the table, and we are all not flying GA to $1,500. We're all flying 72s for $1,500. And quite a wide range of experience levels in the new pilot race to include the new pilot race. It was a very interesting way to diplomatically pull out that reluctant champion. But really, the joy is the best revenge. We just continue to execute, be prepared, be on time, be dressed appropriately, wear the uniform, and all of those things that are part of the airline. Basically, as an airline employee, and it ended up where, I have a daughter, and she might be interested, or I have a niece, or I have a sister. So we became kind of tables turned a little bit about how did you get where you are, and you could help.
Nice.
These now champions help their friends and family members to pursue their goals as well. So,
Well, luckily, you find people who are willing to listen. Because if they don't listen, it doesn't matter what you do or you say, it's not going to go through. But to have that ability to get in there and kind of work with what you have and build up on it and make it better and make that relationship, and you get that respect that, you're here not because they gave it to you, because you're qualified to be there, and they don't understand that sometimes, but, just be prepared, absolutely. So now that we talked about being in a profession, and Lorraine hit upon her relationship with her husband and how they worked through that, how is it that you were able to manage a family and kids, or any relationship that you had while you were going through this, the priorities you put day to day, long term, short term, those sort of things, and let me backtrack just a little bit. So when your parents, I know your father was supportive, and your father was in the Air Force, right? So when your parents find out what you were trying to accomplish, was there any discussion of what are you trying to do? Are you crazy? This is not a profession for women. Did you have any type of a conversation like that? Any of you? I don't know. I know your dad was like, yay. So no. Well, that's fantastic. So the supportive inner circle, I think, makes a huge difference in how you're brought up and to feel that secure and that confidence to press on to what you were going to do. So that's very important. So now that you do have a family, how are you balancing that, and how did you make it work?
I was riding with one of the kids, but it was a 2-part struggling with that balance. But we had our family, our kids first, and in hindsight, our kids will be there. The life-changing opportunities will be there. And we just waited. It almost worked out better for us because we were more experienced. We were what we liked from the packaging of it, and we were able to be more effective. Tracking was already did take our upgrades, so it was good to pan out that we were hoping would pan out. Line checker and flight management and those kinds of things. But we waited, so we would have schedules that we wanted to address our family needs. And it worked for us.
Great. And Casey, and your kids are really young. So I know your husband's stationed at the academy with you?
Yes, so I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and we were married in 1999, so we've been married, it'll be 20 years this September. But we waited about 10 years before we had kids, which has been fantastic now that we are in a position to have a little bit more stability. But I think the biggest thing, there's a lot of misconceptions that you can't have a career and a family, especially in the Air Force. And I think, that's not true, but it does take some work. And the other thing we've learned along the way is we're not afraid to ask for help. The saying that it takes a village, it does. Our families have been incredibly supportive. They've been there with us, especially through deployments. I will say that one of the hardest things I've done has been a stay-at-home mom while my husband deployed for a year while I was working and had very young kids at the time. And I had a lot of help from neighbors to church to just anybody that was willing to help. I was willing to take that help. And so I think sometimes we take on this idea that we have to do it all on our own, and the truth is we don't. And so asking for that help. And just to touch on briefly on the last question you asked about how supportive, is it when you're the only female? And I think the one thing that I will say is that it's nice to have women that have gone before you, because walking into a unit where I was not the first female, I was the only female at the time, but there were women that came before me, and that makes a huge difference. Yes, I was a little bit of an anomaly being the only one at the time, but I wasn't the first. I had role models, and I know she's out here somewhere, General Levitt, to go before me, to kind of set the stage, and it makes it easier for the rest of us. And so I think now we're seeing such a supportive environment across the board. And so my experience has really been tremendously positive.
That's fantastic, and the communication with you and your husband and working as a partnership as well as you. And I don't know the relationships and how your personal life, became part of your professional life, or if that interfered for you, Eileen. I don't know if that was...
Yeah, well, I was married when I first came in the Air Force. I think it was not part of what he bought. That wasn't the bargain that he signed up for. so wound up, parting ways there after a few years. And I always assumed that I was going to get married again and have kids. It just never worked out. But I did, I have predominantly, dated men who are also professionals, predominantly military folks, that sort of thing. So I see the Air Force as my family. So, and I have a lot of very good long-term friendships and relationships. So,
right.
It's just not something that ever worked out. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, last year we had General Harris here, and she, again, it didn't work out for her. She kind of... Mm-hmm. And I asked her, so, in your personal life, she goes, the problem is, just because I'm not married and I'm not in a relationship, people think I'm available anytime. Right. So it's like, can you come here, can you do this? She's like, no, it doesn't work that way. So,
right.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have a very full life outside of work, so yes. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So now I want to talk airplanes now. We got a little bit of flying. So I know you've flown the Airbus and Boeing, and so have you, Bea. So to both of you, any preference? How do you compare those two? What do you like about them, or you dislike?
I always said the Airbus was a very civilized airplane. Airbus wanted to make the prospective buyer want their airplane. So they made it quiet, they made you footrests, they made a table so I didn't spill my yogurt on myself. And Boeing just built a solid airplane. They both are great. I love the quietness in the Airbus, but the Boeing's pretty cool too. The 777 is, when I was on the 747-400, we referred to the 777 as the light twin. And we thought we were funny, but it's a pretty nice airplane.
Okay. What about you, Bea?
My favorite airplane is the 747 fly. It's in your head, you're in your mind. You couldn't get that any really right to the wheels to roll on or faster, and they just really would make it look good. The boss, on the other hand, is the genteel. Auto trim, side stick, quiet, tray table, creature comforts, gold velvet. Just really, really lovely. Wanted to have the mission of the 47 with the creature comforts of the area. So I thought about it now, so that's I love what we do. So that's
Of course. It's all in the present, right? Absolutely. So let me ask you, Eileen, how did you get into writing? I know you're an author. And you published in several publications, and how did that start for you?
So I always wrote a lot when I was, that was one of the things that people would always compliment me on my writing, and it was all technical writing, military writing, that sort of thing. But I always enjoyed writing. I remember in high school I liked, writing essays and things like that. And so I always had this idea that I wanted to write a book, and I assumed it was going to be a technical book. But then as I started thinking more and more about, as I retired and started thinking about what I wanted to do, I started thinking, well, maybe I could write some kind of historical book or something. And I took some, I actually took some classes. I took some classes online. I went to the University of Washington and did a non-fiction writing certificate program. It was about 9 months long. And mostly I just started writing, and my first piece was that I got accepted for publication was a story about when I was flying in the F-16, in the backseat of the F-16 at Edwards, and this was about 1987, and I was flying on a program called Lantern, and we carried a lot of fuel, and we had about an hour and a half of fuel, which is a lot for an F-16 because we carried extra fuel. And before we went to take off, we had a dead battery. And so they were fiddling around with the battery and everything. And of course I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, maybe I should run back in and go to the bathroom. It's like, well, yeah, but to do that I've got to, get out of the airplane, unstrap, get out of the airplane, climb out of the airplane, run across the ramp, take all my gear off, go to the bathroom, go back. It's like a 15-minute process to go to the bathroom. And just as I was thinking about, well, should I do this, then the crew chief goes, we're ready to go. And so, okay, so we get to the end of the runway. I had to go to the bathroom by the time we got to the end of the runway. And so we take off, we're flying around, and we've been flying for like an hour, 20 minutes or something. I'm thinking we're getting ready to go back and beat up the pattern and land. And then all of a sudden a tanker comes on and says, hey, I'm sitting up here in the refueling track and I had a cancellation. Anybody want 10,000 pounds of gas? And before I could say anything, I was flying with a lieutenant colonel and I was a captain. Before I could say anything, this lieutenant colonel goes, sure, and I'm like, no. So we go up and hit the tanker and I get another 5,000 pounds of gas or something. And we flew around for another hour. I thought I was going to die. And so anyway, so I wrote that story up and I sent it to Air and Space magazine. They have this little kind of I was there kind of thing that and they took it. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I established a relationship with an editor, and then I got a few more pieces published, and then from there I got the idea to write a book, and it just kind of spiraled from there. And
so you finished your book?
Yeah, I have one book that's published and one that's on the way. So
okay.
yeah.
What's the name of your published?
It's The Propeller Under the Bed, personal history of home-built aircraft. And so it's a history of home-built aircraft, but it's also a story about my dad. He had the idea in college to, he designed an airplane in college to set a world distance record. And it took him 50 years, but he finally set the record in 2010 when he was 82 years old.
Wow.
So it kind of weaves the two stories together. So, yeah. And then my second book is about a Navy pilot who was shot down in Vietnam, so, in his rescue. And so, yeah.
So do you personally know this story, or is it something that you researched?
I met him from another article I was writing for Air and Space magazine on the F-8, and I kind of tripped over him while I was writing that article, and I said, this could make a great book. And so it's going to be published next year by Potomac Press. So.
Okay, very good. Now I know the experiences we have when we fly, there's always emergencies and how you handle them. And this afternoon, Casey's story was just incredible, to have the mindset and the what's the word I'm looking for, the calmness to go through the steps and pull on that training, on that experience, and get through that. If you didn't hear her story, it's amazing. But my question is, I know you flew for an hour before you actually landed the aircraft. In that hour, you had so much time, it seemed like forever, I'm sure. 1 hour felt like several. What was going through your mind? I don't know if your wingman lead was talking you through, getting you through that flight to get you back home. How was that?
An hour is a very long time to contemplate what might happen, and so we really tried to focus. We probably did the same emergency checklist over and over again. But there was time, certainly where my mind wandered about what could happen, what might happen, am I making the right decision? And that was tough, and that was, you just try to compartmentalize and bring everything back to the task at hand. But it was tough. It's a long time to contemplate that you may not survive the situation, and so we really, again, with my flight lead, my wingman with me, we went through checklists, we talked about our plan of action, but there was some quiet time too where we were both probably thinking about, the what ifs, what should we do, reevaluating. But it was tough. I think, the thing about that, having that moment so early in my career helped me focus on what my priorities were in life, and it really made me realize things that I wanted to do, family, just it set my priorities straight. And so I'm thankful that I had the opportunity so early in my career to just kind of refocus what's important.
Wow. So, any huge emergencies that you went? Well, being a test pilot, backseater there, I'm sure a flight test.
Yeah.
Right. How did those go for you? And were there any moments that you weren't prepared for what was going to happen?
I never had any major emergencies myself in an aircraft. Probably the scariest moment I ever had was when I was on the C-17 program, and I was sitting in the control room. We were on a very early flight of the program, and we had an unplanned reversion into the manual backup system of the airplane. And it was a test point that wasn't supposed to be flown for many, many months, and all of a sudden here we are on the third flight with a configuration that we haven't done all the build-up for and everything, and it was everything turned out okay. But I remember I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, we're just all looking at our strip charts and everything, and all of a sudden, the flight controls engineer goes, "We're in manual backup," and you could have heard a pin drop in that control room. I mean, everybody was just like, "What? There's no way." And then about 5 seconds later, one of the test pilots came on and said, "It looks like we're in manual backup." And we're like, "Yeah." So, And so it's like, don't touch anything, let's talk about this and kind of working the way through it. So, one of the things about testing is you have a very large team often helping you. So in fact, I've often said that one of the safest places to be is doing a hazardous test point, because you've usually got multiple people chasing you in the air, you've got people on the ground looking at all the parameters, you've got experts everywhere to help you solve the problem and get you on the ground. So there are scary moments, but we have processes to work through those to keep everybody safe. So.
Okay. Lorraine?
No.
No?
No.
Wow.
Like I said, it's just
Life is good.
I mean, the diversions for a medical, but then
Yeah.
an emergency, you've got your checklist, you're trained, you know what you're supposed to do. You just go and do what you're supposed to do, and it usually leads you right to where you need to be. So, very good training. If you've got the good training, then it just happens.
Very good. So you were able to handle, obviously, all the emergencies. You're sitting with us, your takeoff equals your landings, you're good to go. That's the important thing, as long as you don't eject out of an aircraft. But I guess bird strikes, engine failures, structural.
We did hit a little yellow finch one time.
Okay.
We found the feathers, and that's about it. So it's been very uneventful.
Good for you.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, wow. Dee?
No, it's in the 141. I was flying downrange during the desert storm, and we were being part of aviation training, and we fly down to Riyadh or several places down in the Saudi Arabian area. And there had been an industry accident, and I think it was maybe Saudi Arabia. There was some fire on the inside of the sidewalls, and it had burned the insulation.
Oh.
And it produced a very, very toxic fume and gas. When we were returning, by the time the airplane coupled up to land, everyone was dead. The fumes were so toxic, the whole airplane had perished. The airplane ended up landing and stopping, but unfortunately, so it made it through the airlines and ran it through the helicopters and the military, and we were mindful of, that's scary. Because the day was on, the people put your oxygen mask on and seal it. Be sure to take care of yourself if you could. So we were crossing the Red Sea, and we had this really steamy fumes from our legs. And the protocol was to put your mask on, checking with everybody, be sure you're okay, and then reduce the cabin pressure. So basically, we started decompress. We were up in the high 30s, and we brought the cabin as high as we got. We still had tremendous fumes. The roadmasters were wonderful. They take it off until the dog's still there. So I was like, we are out of this. There was tight tanks on the road. We have to pull it out and get some gas because we're running out of options here because we're at 10,000 feet, we can't seem to hold pressure altitude, so we had to descend, now I'm burning more gas. So the first officer was an amazing chemical engineer, and he said, why don't we, instead of dumping the cabin, raising the cabin altitude, why don't we try to push it down and increase the differential between the external and internal? And he goes, I'm a chemical engineer, pushes fuels back into solution water. Why? That sounds completely familiar. So there was a roadmaster, young gentleman, 19 years old, and he goes, it smells like we had pallets of goods. We had some weaponry, and he jumped around all the pallets, smelling them and looking for them, and he found a large bag of their thing, which is like, I don't know, a paint thinner or wood treatment that had broken the seal.
Oh, wow.
And basically, someone, oh my gosh, I was a chemical engineer who's got this amazing, bizarro option, which didn't make all sense. And the roadmaster, young kid, who said, I'll help you with this, found a hazmat bag, sealed it off, and we basically got to finish the mission. But I'm like, we're going to end up ditching because I don't have enough gas and I don't have So I said, I have ideas that someone help me. The chemical engineer, one thing, the professor said another, and that was kind of creative problem solving. That was saving the machine. You didn't have to pull the tank out of oil and get gas and finish our machine and basically offload the airplane at destination through the home. So it was that is what we were for, in a functional food environment. And Casey had it with the room there, was like, let's exchange information in a very open and honest manner, because we have got to solve a problem that I don't think we've seen before. And you just got to tap all the resources that you have available to you. And they came from places I never expected, which is a 19-year-old young American. It was just really, we got on the ground and had to do it. It was just something that was like, this was remarkable. And we shared it with, of course, our flight standards people and said, hey, this is something to think about.
Right.
It did kind of adjust some of our options for this particular malfunction going forward. So,
Right. Well, in the airlines, and I'm sure in military aviation, they have the crew resource management. You know, that's something that's so important to use everyone on board, to get an input. You know, ultimately, the captain has the last decision, but pulling from all those resources, I think, is quite important as far as your management style for flying. It makes for safer flying unless you're Lorraine and life is great, you know, nothing happens. That poor Finch, right? So let's talk about, if looking back on everything that you've accomplished, if you could give yourself one piece of advice that you would say to your younger self, what would that be? Eileen?
No.
Okay, I'll let you think. Let me start with Casey.
I think I would say not to put too much pressure on myself, because I really wanted to do well. I wanted to excel, and I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do that. But really, it's about hard work. It's about attitude, and you don't really need all that additional pressure. And so, just I think, you know, I tell the cadets, go to pilot training, just have a good attitude, work hard, and that's half the battle right there. And so I think I would just tell myself, not so much pressure.
Right. B?
I would say stay away from that anyway. Stay focused, stay organized, and really time management is key, especially in your college career and as you're doing flight training and getting ratings and moving up in your professional aviation career. Time management was for me became very critical of that. A lot of work to do, a lot of studying to do, and you also have to live your life, so you can do all of those things and be successful in your career, and have your family, have your community, all those things.
And you learned that when?
It's the hindsight.
Yeah, right. I know.
It's
So.
taken many decades to really appreciate time management. In the business world, time is money.
Right.
So you want to be mindful of your work day, because like all the pilots say, I want you to come to work, I want you to do it 100%. And I want you to go home, get the hell out of here, and go enjoy your friends, your family, your community. So it's kind of to do with the chief pilots that work with me. This job is trying and can be emotionally taxing and draining, but remember family first, get your work done, and then get the hell out, go enjoy your family, because I don't want you to go out. So it's time management.
Okay, Eileen, you're up.
Yeah, no, I think I just say, don't get too excited about things. I think I don't anymore, but when I was younger, I would say up until the time I was probably about 30, there were times I probably overreacted to things, and after a while, though, I just started to realize, and especially, some of this again was having those role models and seeing how other people react to things, and I started to realize that the people I thought were really great leaders didn't get too excited about stuff, and they were passionate when they needed to be, but a lot of times they were very chill about things, and I realized that you don't have to get excited about things. You can be passionate without blowing up or getting overly excited or overreacting to something that happens. And so I think that would, if I could go back and redo anything in maybe the first 8 years of my career, there were a few times I think I, like I said, overreacted a little bit. So yeah.
Okay.
Along with everybody, enjoy the ride. You don't be so focused on getting to the end that you don't stop and enjoy what's going on at the time, your family, your relationships with people, and your outside activities, because you're so driven to get that airline job or the getting into the academy. You don't remember to go out and have fun with your friends and see what's going on around you.
Okay. Slow down and smell the roses, right? So, where do you see yourself in the next couple of years, and what do you still need to accomplish or see yourself accomplishing? So I'll give you a minute to think about that. Anybody
retire?
Yes, it's great.
And see the world. Yep.
Yes.
See the world for more than 24 hours at a time.
Yes.
So.
Very good. Eileen?
I want to retire from working full time, but I think I have a few more books in me, and I'm hoping to do that. But mostly I want to build an airplane. So I started one quite a few years ago and finally abandoned it, and I bought an RV-8 tail kit a couple years ago. And that's kind of my big goal in life right now, is to finish an airplane.
That's great. Well, right next to you is somebody you can talk to. Definitely help you with that. Yeah. So, Casey?
It's a really good question. I'm finally at the point in my career where I have control of what I would like to do, and so my husband and I are very much trying to figure out what the future will look like. Our kids are young, and they're very happy in Colorado, and so are we, and so it's time to start thinking potentially about what's next. But I don't know. It's the short answer.
Yes.
We're very much, that is very much a good question, and something that we're really
something
looking at.
to think about.
It is. I do hear that.
Yes. Okay, babe.
I want to retire as well. I was retired about 4 years early, and I thought he would not be enjoying it as much, and he was just having a blast. So I see that, and that was fun. But I still got work to do. We've got some cultural issues that I want to be sure that are left in good hands, and that we really have this perpetuating culture that success begets success, and we treat each other with dignity and respect, and we execute on all the performance metrics that we want, and we bring in the talent that we want and to retain. So I got a little bit more work to do, but I also would like to see the world and join my husband in his wonderful retirement.
Yes, retirement is amazing. So, yes, I've been retired for a long time, and my husband and I, we enjoy traveling and seeing the world, but something that's very near and dear to my heart is I'm a big advocate for STEM. And as a woman in aviation, I am giving back to the community. I'm trying to pull women up, because once you reach that point, you need to look back and look down and pull them up. We need to support each other. So in your community or in your spare time, how do you think that you could be effective in promoting STEM and promoting more women in those career fields and in aviation? I know you're working full time and you have kids, but what do you see yourself, or do you at this moment go out there and speak?
So it's made major gains, but a STEM career has so many opportunities for you, aviation and otherwise,
Right.
that it opens doors for you. So I'm a huge proponent.
Okay. So do you go out there in the community in your area? I know, and you have a culture there at United, and you're working with that. And so, how do you reach out to the young generation?
So we're very active in women in aviation and girls in aviation now, and that's where we kind of share our message about it's okay to like math, it's okay to like science and physics. Wait till you get aerodynamics and thermodynamics. Wait till you get to those subjects that really intrigue you, and just talk it up and have them realize it's not just a taboo subject for them, and that really would be excited for them to enter that type of career field, and options would be plentiful.
Right.
So just try to socialize it to that
Right.
topic.
Yes, and let them know it's a good thing to be smart. Don't feel like you need to downgrade yourself just to fit in. You want to stand out, not fit in sometimes. So, but Eileen, in your career, that's a huge component of what you did. And so, how are you thinking about when you retire? To reach out and try and.
Yeah, I'd like to do more of that as I have more time. I am a member of International Test and Evaluation Association, Society of Flight Test Engineers, and all those organizations have various STEM outreach programs that they do. Like we have a robotics competition at ITEA conferences. I've done a lot of science fair judging over the years. And so there's various things that we do within, reaching out to the communities, going out to the schools and doing various things. But yeah, I would like to get more involved as I have more time in reaching out specifically to women. I'm starting to get more active in some of the organizations like Women in Aviation. I just joined the 99s here last week.
Yes.
And I think I really would like to do more of that. Going to conferences, speaking, going to schools and reaching out to young girls to show them that they can do this. You don't have to be a boy to be good at math, and being at math is cool. Building things. This is something I mentioned to somebody a while back. Is women have a tendency to move into professions that are helping professions. So they gravitate towards being nurses, doctors, lawyers, things that can help people. And I try to explain to girls that engineers help people too, pilots help people too. They just do it in a different way. When you're an engineer, you build stuff and you design things that help people. So you just have to kind of look at things from a different perspective. And I don't know if how successful that is, but I've never felt as an engineer that I wasn't helping people. I feel that as a test engineer, I've helped the Air Force to have better airplanes that have been safer and more effective, and the missions that they have to accomplish.
And we thank you for that.
So yeah.
Absolutely. So. Casey, I know you're mentoring cadets, and you're in a perfect position right now to be reaching out and building up these young future leaders for our nation. To me, serving in the military was my priority. The pilot came second, but to have the best job in the world in uniform was amazing, and I was very proud of that. So I'm sure reaching out to these cadets, and building them up and letting them know that they're able to do that. So how do they see you in that role, and how do you connect with them?
I feel very lucky because I get to do this really every day, both in the classroom and then down at the airfield. And as I interact with cadets, I'm pretty open about if they want answers to questions about family or life. I feel very open to share that with them, because I think if you share those things, then you give them insight and help them out in making some of those tough decisions. And so I do that, and I also reach back into Civil Air Patrol have been able to attend events and mentor some cadets that are interested in going to the academy. And I really love to get out and speak, to share the story. And even just walking around here at Oshkosh, the number of people that have stopped me in uniform, the young girls who are interested and want to know what I do and how do I get there, and it's incredibly rewarding to be in a position where I feel like I can give back.
Right, right. And I think the visibility is important. Like Lorraine was saying, she talked to veterans, but she also identified with the younger generation of where they started and how they progressed, and that they were 19 years old and that sort of thing. So just being visible to a community that is trying to reach out, and you're trying to show them not only about what you say, but with your actions of how far they can go and what they can achieve. So being accessible, because when we started, there was none of that. We had to kind of forge our own path, try to figure things out on our own, and make the best of it, and make women look good for the ones that came behind, because that was an important ground to lay down, so it wouldn't be as hard, hopefully, for the next women coming in. So before we close tonight, celebrating these powerful female pilots, leaders, and trailblazers, is there anything that you would like to add or say to our audience, to each other, as we close the session tonight? Anybody could start, whoever.
For me, I would think that when I started flying and wanted to do a profession, I was limited by my own perception of what you could do. Everybody tells girls you can do whatever you want to do. But I wish somebody had said from the beginning, you could be an astronaut, you could be a pilot. Start making me think of things as what are options to make choices. Instead of just saying you can do whatever you want, now you're limited by whatever you're thinking. If you've been watching TV all morning, you think you can be a housewife or a nurse or something else. But if somebody pointed out and said, look, you could go fly that plane, you can go to the moon, you can do all these different things, it might make you start thinking a little bit more and expanding your options. Mm-hmm. So I tell people, don't limit yourself.
Right. So be more specific on what you say and how you say it, and the options and pathways that there are available to.
Yeah, be more specific in your own thoughts and just saying, okay.
Right. Anything you'd like to share or add or close with?
I guess I just say don't be afraid to take chances. Get outside your comfort zone. I mean, I've done that many times in my life. Going to OTS was definitely outside my comfort zone. Even starting to write was outside my comfort zone, and again, it wasn't something I was sure I could do, just you'd be amazed at the things that you will learn along the way. And I think for me, that's the best part of all this it's not just the journey, but all the people I've met along the way. It's just wonderful. Aviation is just a wonderful community, and everywhere I go, people welcome you, and they want to help out, and there's it's just the best community I can think of. So yeah.
Casey.
I agree with all of these things. I think, in 22 years of service, it has been an amazing ride. There's certainly been challenges along the way. I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I think the best part about what I do is not only helping others, but also the brotherhood and sisterhood and the camaraderie. And I see it here at Oshkosh with the aviation community. And there's nothing better than that. And so finding that and finding something that you love to do has just been incredibly rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Phoebe?
So the world is your oyster, and there are limitless possibilities. Mentors help you tremendously. They help you get where you need to be. And as someone said up here, ask for help if you need it. And all of us, I think all of us in this auditorium would be more than happy to give you any piece of advice to help you move on your journey. And all our journeys are unique, but there's a tremendous, camaraderie and admiration for the aviation field, and it's there every year.
Okay. There was one thing I read that you wrote. It says, if you love what you do.
If you I love what you do, even though I love what you do.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to thank you for being here this evening and sharing your insights, your journey, your personal experience to help share the aviation community their way of looking at women in aviation and how we got from where we started, less than 0.1% up to 6%, and we're trying to grow that, and pilots are in huge need, I mean, there's a shortage, but we're trying to encourage women to do that and know that you can balance a family life and a professional career in STEM and aviation and anything that you put your mind to. So thank you for coming this evening. I want to thank each panelist here. And once we close, you can come up, and if you want to talk to them, ask them questions, be more than happy to be able to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.